told you stories about how I grew up. I grew up in a good American Baptist home. All through my high school and college days. But I grew up in a very culturally conservative and theologically or biblically conservative home. Unlike the conservative in the United States or in the West. It's just different. I grew up with lots of do's and don'ts. Because Baptists do that well. They tell you what to do and what not to do. For example, we could never play soccer Sunday because a mom would say it's a high holy day. Honor God by not playing soccer. You know, we English people, we call it football, right? Football. We could not bring playing cards home because that's evil. And if my mom saw us playing cards, oh, I don't know what would happen. Maybe she will implode. I don't know. The other thing was we were never allowed to go and see movies. I can basically count my fingers and tell you how many times I snuck out to watch movies when I was growing up. All through high school, imagine that. And one of the movies that I snuck out to watch was King of Kings. That came out in 1961. But it came later to Nagaland, sometime around 1965 or 1967. I was probably 8 or 9 and snuck out and watched the King of Kings and got horrified. I heard sermons from the pulpit where it was fire and brimstone. That it was almost promoting a fearsome faith. It's almost like you need to be scared. If you have no faith, you are hellbound. That's the kind of theology I grew up. Very scary understanding of who God is. As if God is on a mission to avenge every human being's sin out there. Kind of scary, huh? And so when I became a United Methodist, I learned that God is love and grace. Grace is something very powerful. God gives us abundant of grace. And grace allows us to see each other eye to eye, despite and in spite of our differences, whether politically, sociologically, or even theologically. It does not matter because grace abounds. Are you with me on that one? Yeah. We should be able to sit and worship and hold our hands and sing Kumbaya together because grace abounds. Right? That's what it is. Imagine Christianity without grace. I probably wouldn't be standing here. See? It is the grace of God that transforms our lives and makes us who we are in the sight of God. Later, we will be singing a hymn called Grace Greater Than Our Sin. Right? Grace greater than our sin. We Christians, we are very smart about talking about grace. When we come to worship on Sundays, yes, we like to be religious and talk about wonderful biblical, theological understanding about grace. It's a very churchy language, right? But grace becomes real when we live it, right? We can sit here and speak about grace all day long, but as soon as we leave these doors and go out to the world from where we came and have no grace whatsoever, then basically we have failed. Are you with me on that one? Yeah, that's what grace is. And so Apostle Paul says, grace, the Greek word is charis. Charis means gift. God has given us a gift of life, gift of salvation, gift of reconciliation, gift of accepting one another as child of God. See? It is not about exuding ourselves with this thing called self-righteousness. Grace is not about self-righteousness. Grace is about servanthood, right? It is about servanthood. Are you willing to lay down your life for others? That's what Jesus did. In fact, John the Baptist says, I must decrease so that Christ might increase. John chapter 3. That's what grace is. But Apostle Paul says something different. Even while we were yet sinner, Christ died for us. Imagine that. Even when we did not know who God is or what God meant for us, God was willing to risk his love and send his only and one begotten Son, John 3:16, to show us who God is. Right? In our United Methodist lingo, we call that Prevenient Grace. That's a good word to learn. Prevenient Grace. Prevenient Grace is pay to preview. You remember? Many years ago, there used to be paid preview. Remember that? You throw some money, and then you see the movie. Paid review. Say that again. Paid per view. They still have it? Oh, okay. So it's one of those things, which means that Apostle Paul is saying, God has paid his life with love and mighty grace even before you knew it. And so grace goes before you and comes after you. Grace is above you and grace is below you. We are never out of God's grace. Nobody is out beyond God's reach. Right? God's redemptive act on the cross includes All of us, whether you're lost or found. Grace abounds. That is what Apostle Paul is saying. Meaning we say sometimes the definition of grace is unmerited favor, right? That means you did nothing to deserve this grace, but God was willing to give it to you anyway, and you can't do anything about it, right? It's almost like during Christmas time, somebody gives you a present, and you just go, why? Right? Why are you giving me this? Because you have this sense, I don't deserve this. Why are you? And then the person just looks at you and says, because I love you. Right? It's just, so grace is just gift of God, whether you like it or not. It has been lavished upon you. Live it. I love grace. It's a powerful stuff. And so we read in the scripture about how grace has been explained to us. One of the classic story about grace is found in Matthew 15 about this young man called the prodigal son. You remember that story? Prodigal. The word prodigal is not bad. It's just recklessness. It's just want to go and spend. I think we all fall into that, right? We all like shopping. We can be known as prodigal as well. But the story says that this young son, almost like in a very deceptive way, took what was his, even before the father was dead or the older brother was dead. For the younger one to assume and take his share and to walk away in my tribal culture, that is very bad. So imagine how heartbroken this father was. Maybe he got up every morning and then canvassed the horizon, maybe wondering, my son is coming home. Imagine that. And yet one day, the father did see a little dot moving on the far horizon. And he knew in his heart, my son is coming home. Right? And what did he do? He runs towards him. He runs towards this prodigal son. And then it didn't matter whether he stunk or he was properly dressed. It didn't matter. He claimed his son. Right? When he brought the son home, he didn't say, son, let's go to the family room and we need to do some chatting. We need to have some come to Jesus moment. According to the story, you will not find anywhere that father sat down with the son and had some conversation. You will not find anywhere in the text that you are grounded for life and your inheritance is no more. There is nothing of that in the text, right? But grace abounds, even in that critical moment. Father brings out the best and replace the tattered, torn shoes, sandals, clothes, whatever he was wearing, and gives him the best and throws a party. That is prevenient grace. Grace that he did not deserve. But the Father was willing to lavish upon the Son who was lost but found. That's what our gospel is. Sometime, unfortunately, we assume this very judgmental role as Christians. We look down upon people who have some messy background or messy life, or trying to find a way to God, or trying to find who they are, right? Sometimes we have tendencies of looking down upon them. Among the millennials, in the survey, they were asked about church, why they are not in church. You know what the millennial says? We don't because church is too judgmental. Think about that. Is that how your grandchildren and great-grandchildren sees an institution that you love so much? Think about that. Because somehow we have taken the role of God and trying to pontificate and say things on behalf of God, and yet God really didn't say that. God is about grace. Yeah. People come to church, people join church not because you have a wonderful building, not because you have a beautiful sound system, not because you have pretty pianists or a handsome pastor. No. You know why they come? Because they have found love. Because they have found grace. Yeah, that's what it is. They say when a visitor walks into a sanctuary, within 3 seconds, visitors know whether they're coming back or not. They're weighing on how caring, hospitable we have been. If they did not see any of that, they have decided, I am not coming back to this church. They're a bunch of self-righteous people. They just want to be happy among themselves and nobody else. See? And so we need to be thinking about living out this prevenient grace. How do we love people, despite and in spite of who they are? Because you and I were there too. It was the amazing grace that saved us, a wretched like us, to bring us together. Church is not the most holy place. It consists of people with brokenness, right? It's almost like going to a meeting. That's who we are. We have past. We have our own brokenness. We have failed, right? We have taken the wrong path. But God is not out there to punish you, but to show you grace. That's what our faith is. Our United Methodist theology from early on, instead of preaching fire and brimstone, John Wesley and early circuit riders preached about grace. Yeah. And there are 5 different varieties of grace our United Methodist Church speaks about. And I think if we specialized to live out this grace of God, I think people will know. People might just say, I want to go to that church because they are very graceful. Ooh, wouldn't that be nice? Who wants to go to a cranky church? I don't want to. You want to go to a church where there is a warm space somewhere around the pews and warm space of love in somebody's heart. And there are liturgies that can bring your hearts and minds together and be in the presence of God. That is worship, right? Yeah. And no matter how good, bad, or worse week you had, at some point, with some liturgy that we have, either it's a prayer confession or call to worship, or it's the prayer response, at least one of them will speak to you. It may not always be the sermon, but maybe a hymn that is carefully selected to be sung. Maybe it is the text of the scripture that will just unlock you and may find a home filled with God's grace. That is what church is about. That is what people of faith is about. Can we specialize on that one? Yeah. I think we can do it. There we go. That's the end of my sermon.